Welcome, everybody. It's great to be here on LinkedIn Live. Mike Marcellin with Juniper Networks here. So next week, as you saw in the intro, is the Juniper Networks Global Summit. It's May 11th, so mark your calendars and please do register. And so today, I'm live with an all-star panel of industry voices to talk about what this shift from the old networking toward an experience-first networking really means. We'll also be monitoring the chat. I see some people logging in and saying hi, so that's great. So as we go, feel free to drop any questions or comments, and I'll be kind of keeping an eye on that and hopefully bringing some of those in. So without further ado, let's introduce our panel of guests. First up, we have Zeus Kerravala. He's the principal analyst at ZK Research. Zeus, welcome to the stage, and maybe tell us a little bit about your current research areas and what you're looking at.
Sure. Thanks, Mike, for having me. And actually, I said hello in the LinkedIn thing too, so I'm trying to monitor that and talk about this. Now, as far as research coverage goes, as you know, I'm not a typical analyst that has, you know, a single coverage area that I live and die with for the rest of my life. I tend to focus more on the emerging technologies that are changing the landscape of communications, networking, and security. And so, you know, right now, you know, a few years ago, I didn't really cover a lot of WAN, but of course now we have this transition to SD-WAN going on. I'm looking a lot at, you know, the impact that artificial intelligence has on network and security operations. I think that's a pretty fascinating field. Some of the other areas that I'm looking at right now are what's going on in the wireless industry with both 5G, Wi-Fi 6, 6E, Wi-Fi 7's coming. And so, and, you know, just from an overall perspective, the role of the network has changed itself, right? This is something you and I have talked about, where if you think of businesses as they go through their digital transformation plans, they're adopting a lot of network-centric technologies, mobility, cloud, IoT, even AI, things like that. And so the network itself is playing a bigger role in how companies operate. So that's you know, a quick intro on how I look at the world.
Thanks, Zeus. And for those of you that don't follow Zeus, please do, because as he said, he's got probably the most comprehensive view of all of those different areas and can really see patterns that are emerging across them. So Zeus, it's great to have you here today. Next, we have Nupur Kanoi. She is a senior network engineer at Google Fiber. So Nupur, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Mike, for the introduction. I work as a senior network engineer in Google Fiber. My role is more focused towards expansion of Google Fiber. Just to tie in, Google Fiber is expanding in like more market cities now, and I am more focused towards automating the G-Fiber network. So that's again that's something that we have been trying to do. And I have been a Juniper ambassador for more than 6 years now, so it's been a fun ride, definitely. And the other thing that I want to highlight is we have been trying to do a lot of trying to do different things than what the typical service provider does. So that's something that I would just want to highlight, what G-Fiber is doing and what I am doing.
Great. Well, thank you, Nupur. It's great to have you here today and looking forward to our conversation. And last but not least, we have Stefan Fouant. He's the principal owner of Shortest Path First. Stefan, welcome, and maybe give the audience a brief intro on you.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. Really excited to be here. I've got my Juniper swag here at the ready. But yeah, super excited. You know, my background is I've been working with Juniper for about 24 years. I think my first exposure was back in 1998. You know, I worked for a lot of other folks for many years, and about 3 years ago decided to start my own Juniper reseller company. So I do, our primary function is to resell hardware and software, and then we also do consulting and network architecture, those types of things. Yeah, I've also been a Juniper ambassador for roughly the last 6 years as well. I think I joined around the same time as Nupur. And really excited. I'm really super excited about the sessions next week. So looking forward to seeing you guys all there.
That's great. And for those of you keeping track, 1998 was the year Juniper launched its first or shipped its first product. So Stefan is an OG Juniper supporter. Stefan, it's great to have your perspective throughout the years as the industry has changed and as Juniper has changed.
Actually, in 1998, like I was my pre-analyst days, I was actually working for a a reseller myself back then, who we actually were funded partially by Juniper and Extreme Networks, and so we moved a lot of Juniper gear back in the day too.
So I was working at a company called UUNet, and we were, I think, one of the first flagship companies. And this was even before the flagship M40 product came out. So we were testing code on Olives back then, for any of you guys who remember those Olives. Yeah.
That's right. Olive was the original version of Junos, essentially. It became Junos, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
These are the interesting stories for me because I was just in college at that time. So.
You have more hair than we do.
Good answer, Nupur. Good answer. Okay. Well, so kind of interesting as we just did a quick journey down memory lane. Let's fast forward now to where things are going. And, one of the things that I know you all have heard Juniper talk about, and many others have as well, is this concept of experience-first networking. And I'll give kind of a brief definition of what that means from our perspective, but then I would love to hear what all of you kind of take away from that notion and what you're seeing out in the market. But just in brief, experience-first networking is just an acknowledgement that the network and where things need to go is not about boxes and speeds and feeds. It's ultimately about how the users of the network experience it. Because I can tell you the network is up and running, but if you're having a bad experience, then that doesn't matter to you. And so our focus, it's really our true north as a company, is really about kind of simplifying that experience for the network operator, the people that build and run networks every day, and then creating a differentiated and optimized end user experience. And we'll get into a little bit about how we do that with AI and with automation and other tools, but that's really what it's all about. And it's really thinking beyond the network itself to what the network enables. So with that kind of as a backdrop, maybe I'll just go around the horn real quick, and Zia, start with you. Just, what does that notion of experience-first networking mean to you, and how does it get manifested in some of your research areas and in the many people that you talk to?
Yeah, well, I love the topic of experience-first networking because it orients very well with my research. In fact, the real kind of driving, I guess, focus for my research is about how businesses are changing experiences, right? So it's pretty well documented that customer experience is now the #1 brand differentiator for a lot of companies. Businesses that offer a great customer experience tend to thrive. They tend to become market leaders. Ones that don't fail, right? And there's another side to the CX coin, which is employee experience. And often companies forget about that, but you can't really offer a best-in-class customer experience unless you have a best-in-class employee experience. And so this concept of experience-first networking is how you leverage the network to be able to create both experience, employee and customer experience. And I think the one thing is Juniper, that's where it's helped Juniper, is I used to think of Juniper historically as a collection of best-of-breed stuff, right? You had good products, but you didn't really have that overarching kind of vision and lighthouse to row to. But it's actually given Juniper that. And if you look at a lot of the acquisitions that Juniper's made with Apstra and 128T and Mist and things like that, those all are additive to that experience-first networking strategy. And so I think it's been good for Juniper because it obviously creates that focal point for the company and how to build your products. And if it adds to that experience for networking, do it. And if it doesn't, then you got to question it. But it's also helped, I think, drive your acquisition strategy, your product portfolio, which is ultimately then good for your customers as well.
Yeah, thank you for that, Zeus. And you're absolutely right. It's been certainly been a catalyst for us to get on this journey. Some of these amazing acquisitions that we've made. So Nupur, let me pivot over to you, because you talked a little bit at the beginning about how Google Fiber thinks about things a little bit differently as a service provider. So I imagine some of that different thinking is around what it takes to run the network and the experience of users of the network. So give us your take on experience-first networking.
Yeah, as a service provider engineer, in my opinion, I believe experience-first networking is more about, again, reiterating the same thing that you, Zeus, and you mentioned. It's more about modern customer experience, like delivering modern customer experience, but at the same time, adding simplification for a network engineer to be able to build upon or, maintain the network. Being from the service provider industry, there are lots of like the network is already pre-built, when there was nothing sort of automation, like there was no automation back then, right? So there is a lot of legacy stuff lying around. So it's a slow road for a service provider to take that, like to automate and all those stuff. But most of the things are driven by customer now, especially during the COVID era. Everything is fast tracked, right? So customers have started demanding more from the from their service providers and also from the network. So because of that, service providers have started having that vision, started to see that vision of, implementing automation or AI in the network. I believe Juniper saw that quite some time, like maybe 10 years back, since they started their company. Or because even with the legacy hardware that we have in our network, we have that thing called as on-box automation. Even if a service provider cannot bring in something, like cannot develop AI or something with, or there's lots of investment in that, right? So with on-box automation, lots of possibilities open up, and kudos to Juniper to make that for making that possible.
Yeah, thank you, Nupur. And Stefan, I definitely want to turn it to you, because Zeus mentioned some of the acquisitions, and I know you've had particular experience with at least one of the acquisitions that we made a few years back, which was Mist. So give us your take on experience first networking and how you're seeing that play out in the real world.
Well, yeah, I'll talk a little bit about all of those things. Actually, I think, I'm total agreement with the rest of the speakers here that, to me, this is all about improving the overall customer experience and simplifying the network to the extent that we can. And I mean, let's face it, over the last decade, networks have gotten really, really complex. And Zeus had mentioned a couple of the different acquisitions. There's 128T, there's Mist, and then we've got Apstra. And really in all three of those regards, I think Juniper has really made some brilliant acquisitions here that have done wonders to simplify the network. So for example, if anybody that's played around with EVPN in the data center, and has done any of that, it's quite cumbersome. It's very manual. And this isn't just a Juniper thing. This is across the board, all the vendors, right? Configuring EVPN in the data center is a very complex subject matter. But anybody who gets a chance to spend time with Apstra will realize how quickly it is to build a greenfield or even incorporate a brownfield network into that environment, and then manage not only the underlay but the overlay. Similarly, we've got Mist, and it's not just about the things that Mist brings to the table in terms of like troubleshooting, but the fact that we don't no longer have to deploy wireless controllers in our environments, and being able to completely bring that into the cloud and manage it from the cloud dramatically simplifies the overall experience of the end user who's configuring it, managing it, and then facilitating the troubleshooting aspects of those. Yeah, I could go on and on, but yeah.
Mike, I just want to touch on a point that Nupur brought up that I actually didn't mention too when I was talking about experiences. Was you brought up, Nupur, the engineer experience, and Stephan, you brought up the point of networking has gotten a lot more complex, and so the point I brought up was we're relying on our networks more, we're to do more, but yet networking's gotten more complicated, much more complicated. And Mike, I think one of the aspects I think of every Juniper acquisition that you've made isn't just kind of a better mousetrap. It's a fundamental rethink on the operational side of running the network. And that's a market different than kind of Juniper acquisitions in the past, where you maybe look for the better, the better widget, but didn't really think about the operational side. That's a huge part of experience first networking in my mind.
You hit it on the head. I mean, from Mist, which obviously, look, all vendors offer some degree of automation, and we do as well. Ours is informed more by AI to make that operator experience even more proactive and self-driving. And then you add to the fact that we are gathering end user client data at a rate that no one else can even keep up with, so that we see troubles or impacts on that end user experience faster than anyone else can. So those two taken together, really allow us to deliver on this vision of experience first networking. So let me pivot now. Nupur, you mentioned something in the last in your last comment about end users are starting to demand more from the network, and that's very interesting because that is the theme of our summit next week. And let me give you a little bit on why that's the theme. You may think, oh, that's just a marketing theme. Demand more from your network sounds great, whatever. Actually, it's an acknowledgement that, people have worked with legacy incumbents for a long time. And when you do that, you kind of just grow to accept things because they've always been the way they've always been. And you may not know that actually there's a different or better way. Now you can imagine for us coming in and wanting to make sure that people understand it actually, there is actually a new way to go about operating the network. There's a new way to deliver differentiated experiences to your end users. So part of our task is kind of to shake people a little bit so that they can get out of their current reality, step back and realize that something better exists. So that's what demand more means. And that's what we hope the summit next week will provide people, is a different point of view across all parts of the network and all the outcomes that the network delivers as a new way to think about how to go about delivering those outcomes. So with that as a bit of a backdrop, I'd love to get everyone's point of view on that. And why don't we turn it around? And Stefan, I'll start with you. Just kind of what is demand more from your network? What does that conjure up in you?
I think that it means being, having the end user being able to essentially demand that they're getting more value out of that network, right? And, kind of dovetailing into the whole use of AI and bringing that into the picture. We were, previously talking about that with the Mist. I can talk, speaking from experience here. I have a customer that loves Mist and just the ability for being able to use the Marvis AI to do that proactive and predictive analytics. It's one thing when, say, like an entire floor, the wireless goes down. Those are typically a little bit easier to troubleshoot. That means like, your AP is down or something along those lines, but it's a lot more difficult when everybody else on the floor is working, but you've got just one particular client that can't connect for whatever reason. And this one customer that I have that deployed Mist several years ago, they used to spend days sometimes troubleshooting some of these issues. And so when we talk about demanding more from your network, it's like, what is the typical troubleshooting process? The data is already there. And the network operator would already be going through that in a very manual process. And now we're talking about bringing AI and analyzing that data and trying to identify what's the root cause of that particular. And so this customer that used to spend days, in most cases now, they're notified that there's an issue before they're even aware of it or before an end user is complaining. And often, most cases, they're able to fix or resolve the problem in an hour or less. And oftentimes it's much, much less than that. So just being able to demand and get more value out of the network.
Yeah, for sure. Nupur, you touched on this already. Maybe go a little bit deeper about what that means to you as a network engineer and what you think it means to your end customers even.
Yeah. So again, I'll reiterate a few of the things. Because of COVID, everything has fast tracked, right? So everyone has started using internet, not unlike before, right? The internet traffic uses has kind of exponentially grown. So because of that, even the enterprise customers have started realizing the importance of internet. Back then, they were just happy with, maybe having 2 or a couple of redundant lines, internet connection, and they would manually fail over whenever they see any traffic loss or loss of connection. But now they understand the revenue loss that incurs whenever there is any packet loss or loss of connection. So they are kind of demanding SD-WAN from, like, the basic demand has become SD-WAN for most of the enterprise customers. And again, Juniper comes in and helps us with that in terms of providing like Juniper's 128E is a complete package. In those terms, it has inbuilt security features which customers kind of demand, the SASE model, right? The other thing is cloud native support that again Juniper's 128E has, and the SD-WAN is obviously there with 128E. So Juniper is kind of helping us SD-WAN to cater to their customers, and that is what I really love about Juniper and the partnership that we have with Juniper.
Thank you, Nupur. So yes, I'm going to turn it a little bit for you, which is because you look across the industry so comprehensively. Do you agree with the premise I had that sometimes you just get embedded in how things are, and you don't step out of that? And what can be unleashed or opened up when you do?
So,
Oh, yeah, Mike. I mean, this legacy thinking that we have has to go away, and I think we have to rethink what's possible. Leveraging the network opens up so many more possibilities, right? And I do think companies are expecting more from it. I was talking with somebody who ran a hotel in New York the other day, and they were saying that the quality of network to the guests is a big reason why people stay there or not, right? It used to be if things didn't work, we just sort of. In fact, I remember talking to somebody at a school system where their Wi-Fi had been down this was years ago, for a week, and teachers didn't say anything because they just assumed that's the way wireless was, right? That's not the case anymore. We moved everything to the cloud. We do everything on mobile. And if the network's not there, our businesses can't function, right? And so I think from that perspective, we do expect more from our network because it's the engine that drives our business today. In fact, I think companies used to almost define themselves by their compute infrastructure, right? You think I'm an IBM shop, right? I think we're doing more so from a network perspective because it's the thing that connects all of us together, both people to people, people to applications, and it's the thing that allows us to actually get work done, especially in this era that we're going into of hybrid work, right, where we have people scattered all over the place now. So we're leveraging the network more than ever, and I think that there's so much innovation happening in the network. In fact, I've seen more innovation in networking in the past 5 years than I probably saw the previous 20, right? And so there's a lot of exciting stuff going on, but we do need to open up our minds and how to to use the network in different ways that we did before.
Yeah. Well, so let's look a little bit forward. Obviously, over the past decade, we've seen a ton of change. And to your point, Zeus, maybe we're in the past 5 years from SaaS and SDN and now AI, zero trust, all of these things that we're all now, right in the thick of. So let's look forward a bit and get out your crystal balls, for the next decade of networking or even just the next few years. What do you think will really shape those next few years that's, either here today or just around the corner? Nupur, let's maybe start with you.
In my belief, it will be more about intent-based networking and self-healing networks, just like self-driving cars, right? Self-healing networks will be the future, because I'm gonna I keep mentioning COVID because service provider industry has changed because of COVID. So everything has changed from past 2 years, and I'm not talking like the intent-based networking. When I mention intent-based networking, it's not about that we'll be seeing it in next 10 years, but probably in next couple of years we'll see that as a new trend and something that has been that will be adopted by many of the service providers.
Got it. Stefan, what does your crystal ball tell you?
Well, I think we're just going to keep moving forward with, the network automation. And I mean, just kind of looking back, 10 years ago, we were basically automating compute and we were automating storage, and we were able to spin up those resources in relatively short order. But the networking piece was always the long pole, and it still would require some type of coordination with a network engineer or a network operator to, stitch points together. And we've been talking about software-defined networking, those types of things for the last several years. And it did seem kind of like a distant, thing that was, it was going to take some time to get there. But I'm actually really amazed. I'm having more and more conversation with customers that they are actually deploying automation. The APIs are really well established now. People are getting exposure to it. And so it's a really, really exciting time to be able to spin up the networking element at the same pace and at the same, velocity that we're spinning up compute and storage. And so I think that trend is just going to continue, kind of dovetailing on what Nupur said, self-healing, being able to automate the troubleshooting. I just think the future is very, very bright for networking.
And Zeus, I know you're always looking around corners. So what do you see?
Yeah, I think one of the big changes that we'll see in Mike is the sort of erosion of these networking silos. Historically, even when you talk to customers, right, they have a person that runs the WAN, they have the data center network, they have the Wi-Fi network, right, they have the campus network. But when it comes to experiences, the application that you're using doesn't care about these networking silos. There's just one network. And I know that's a direction that Juniper is trying to head down, but more and more, I think we will get to that point where we start thinking of the network as a single entity and not these discrete silos, because that's, in a lot of ways, that's what gets in the way of experiences, because you may have invested in one part of the network, but not the other. And I do want to touch on the AI aspect of it. For people watching this, I know there's a lot of sort of fear and trepidation out there about networking and AI. Will it take my job, or will it not? I look at artificial intelligence as in this, both Nupur and Stefan mentioned this concept of a self-driving network or fully autonomous network. Look, that's a ways down the road. That's like the concept of the self-driving car, right? Would anybody get into a car today that's got no driver and no controls? Probably not. Well, maybe Elon Musk might, but outside of him, probably not, right? But there's a bunch of AI being built into cars today. Parallel park assist, lane change order, things that make us better drivers. Similarly with networking, I know a lot of things that Mist has brought to market isn't really meant to replace the engineer, but to make them a better engineer. There's not an engineer that I know that's out there that likes to spend a quarter of their time doing Wi-Fi troubleshooting, but that's what you're doing today. There's not a network engineer I know that likes to spend another 25% of the time updating VLANs, but that's what you're doing today. All of those heavy lifting and manual tasks can be automated. And I'll leave you with this. For network engineers watching this, if you're doing things today that do not make your resume more strategic, don't do them. Find a way to automate them out of your job, and AI is the key to doing that.
That's incredible advice, Zeus. Thank you for that. Okay, we got to wrap up. We're almost at the top of the hour. Let's do one last question. Let's do it in lightning round mode. So all of you all have seen the agenda for the Juniper Summit. So just give me one session that you're most excited about on the summit agenda.
Maybe I'll go first.
Yes, please. Go for it.
Yeah. So being a service provider engineer, I am most excited about SASE. I think there's one session or a session on SASE and beyond, and the other one for WAN automation. So that's something I'm really looking forward to, and listening in their perspective, what they want to, like, what their perspective is on this.
Got it. Stefan, how about you?
I think for me, because my experience these days is mostly with data centers, I'm really looking forward to the exciting session on leveraging automation for reliable data center operations.
Yeah, that'll be a great one. Zeus.
Well, obviously, AI Apps one I think is going to be really exciting. It's oriented in this concept of experience-based networking. But the other one I'm really looking forward to is 5G. I think 5G is a fundamentally different type of wireless network. I think it's going to change our lives in ways that we don't even know yet. So I'm excited to see what's happening there.
So for me, I'll take a turn at answering this question. It's actually Rami's section, which is going to kick us off because it's a view from the CEO's office. And yes, it's about Juniper to some extent, but really it's about what all companies should be thinking about, and things like attracting and retaining talent and navigating a company through uncertainty of a pandemic and of inflation and the power of AI. I think it'll give everyone a view into what their C-suite and their board of directors are thinking, which is always really valuable. So
his session is always the best, right? So
yes. He always does great. So maybe I cheated by picking him.
Yes, definitely.
He's also our CEO. So thank you, Zeus, Nupur, Stefan. It's always great to speak with you. I'm looking forward to connecting with everyone on May 11th at the Juniper Summit. Check the comments, check the outro for how to register if you haven't already. Have a great day, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.